The world is already living with the effects of climate change, and we're seeing that in Europe, we're seeing it in North America. Europe's already had 3 heat waves just this summer alone. But nowhere is this more visible or more urgently than in West Africa. We're seeing shifting rainfall, coastal erosion, and worsening droughts all coming together in countries that have been struggling with food insecurity, conflict, and fragile health systems for decades. I'm Dominic Bowen, and I'm host of the International Risk podcast, where we unpack the topics that really matter. And to help us explore these important issues today, we're joined by Ibrahim Hama. He's an environmentalist and a communications specialist with over 2 decades of experience. He works on climate adaptation and community engagement right across West Africa. Ibrahim, welcome to the International Risk podcast.
Thank you very much, Dominic, for your invitation.
Fantastic. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you today? What's keeping you busy?
Today I'm in Senegal, Dakar. So now at this time, it should be normally raining season, but we're still waiting for the raining. So that means something for us.
And funnily, just as you said that, Ibrahim, it's summer here in Europe, but just as you said you're waiting for the rainy season, I kid you not, it started pouring outside. It was sunny 30 seconds ago and it started pouring outside. Hopefully you get some of this rain in the near future. But for communities, Ibrahim, that are living with shifting rainfall, that are living with prolonged droughts, land degradation, and just prolonged food insecurity, this isn't a future risk. This isn't something that we're worried about in the future that many European and North American countries are considering. This is already impacting their lives. Climate change is often discussed through statistics, in models, in global targets, and we talk about all of those things on the International Risk podcast. But today, I'd like to start by you painting a picture for us. Can you help us understand what does climate change actually look like on the ground? What does it look like for the communities that you're working with?
Climate change coming from communities is not simply an environmental issue. So it's fundamentally a human development challenge. From those communities, you feel that climate change is not longer a future threat. For example, in coastal community here in Senegal, in many rural communities across West Africa, more than Senegal, people describe the climate change through lived experiences. Sometimes they can say that the raining season is shorter, or sometimes you can hear that floods are becoming more destructive. In other communities or other areas, they will tell you that the droughts last longer or pasture disappear earlier. For coastal communities or fisheries communities, they will tell you that fish migrate differently, or agriculture communities in central Senegal will tell you that the agriculture calendar no longer works as before. So climate change is affecting food production, livestock, fisheries, household incomes, nutrition, migration, education, gender equality. So many countries, many communities experience multiple stocks. So this is the reality. This is what we see, what we are discussing, that what people or communities report to us every single day.
And it's really tempting to understand climate change by a single disaster. And we know every time there's a big flood or a big storm or a heat wave, the journalists will often start by saying, "Is this caused by climate change?" It's very tempting just to link the two, but I think it's much more powerful if we look at the impacts of climate change as a slowly progressing thing that's happening over many years and sometimes decades, about how land, livelihoods, animals, and even the choices that families have to make, these evolve over years, not over a single event. And I'm really blessed to have lived and worked in Syria, in Lebanon and Iraq, places like Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, Liberia, where I've seen communities change how they lived. Even more recently in Ukraine, I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine since 2022. And when I watch how communities, when I watch how families, and when I watch how individual people, colleagues and friends that I've made over the years, how they've evolved and how their lives have had to evolve. It really is insightful and incredibly interesting. And of course, sometimes it's incredibly painful as well. Is there one community that you've been working with or you've observed over the last decade or so? Can you tell us what's changed? The land, the animals, the health of the families?
Yeah, definitely, Dominic. What you describe is quite common. Maybe it can just differ from one side to another one. For example, let's us say coastal region in West Africa. I have been working with those communities in many countries, from Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Bissau. Climate change, what you can see with those communities alone does not create disasters. They understand it. It interacts with existing vulnerabilities. So we have almost something. Those reality includes, for example, when you take the poverty of infrastructures, the lack of climate information sometimes, or the degradation of the ecosystems related to the way they produce or they make some infrastructure. We have sometimes they report the limited access to finance because even though they want to initiate some activities or they are limited by the finance. We have also the insecure land tenure. We have the governance challenges. So two communities exposed to exactly the same drought can experience completely as different outcomes depending on the resilience. So the climate hazards may be natural, yeah, definitely, but human vulnerability is largely created by the social and the economic, but also the governance condition. So you can see those communities seeing all their livelihoods being affected, or the way they are producing in agriculture. Everything has been changed, but they know that climate change is a reality, but they feel and they understand that you have also some or other things that exacerbating their vulnerability.
And I think that's spot on because climate change clearly interacts with poverty, it interacts with land pressures, with weak infrastructure, with existing food insecurity, water stress, and we see it push systems that are already fragile. It tips them over the point of survival. And I know in Senegal, we're already seeing salt water intrude into aquifers and into farmlands, and we're seeing this impact some of the major population centers and some of the bread bowls that are producing a lot of the agriculture that's needed to sustain the population. Can you talk to us about this? How rising sea levels, along with rainfall being disrupted, is actually impacting climate change, and how that's affecting food insecurity and other areas within society in Senegal?
Definitely, Dominic. So, food insecurity today is increasingly climate driving. So that's a fact. I think that community understand that, and the scientists also confirm that. So, climate shocks reduce. For example, when you have the agriculture communities, you have the reduction of the crop yields for livestock. Productivity also is decreasing, the fish availability for fishermen, but generally the household incomes also are reduced. So this leads to higher food prices, negative coping strategy, migration. You can see all those youth that take boats trying to reach Europe. You can see also conflict over natural resources.
And that's really interesting. You talked about people catching boats and migrating from Senegal to Europe in order to achieve a safe and a reasonable life. Now, this is not why the government of Senegal does it. The government of Senegal does it because it's its responsibility to protect and look after its citizens. But this is an important factor, and I think this is something that more European politicians need to understand, that the safer and the more developed that Senegal is, then the less migration that European countries might have to deal with. But Senegal's government has been fairly proactive, at least on paper. There's the adaptation plan that the Senegal government had. Then there's Senegal's 2050 framework, which has a focus on food security, food sovereignty, climate resilience. But let's make it really clear this year, 2026, 60% of the population cannot afford a healthy diet. And food insecurity is projected to nearly double between June and August, which is the lean season in Senegal, in certain communities like Bambay and Guderi and some other towns. What is the gap? Talk to us about what that actually means. The gap between strategy, what looks good on paper, and the reality that people are living and that you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. So Senegal, as you said, has made important commitments. So there are strong national policy and adaptation plans. So we agreed on that. So the challenge, as in many countries, is implementation. Definitely. So several gaps remain from what you can hear, what you can read, and what you can analyze. We have limited financing, so that's recurrent. We have institutional capacities, local implementation, because the model of governance is not working. We have also the challenges related to access to the climate services. We have also the coordination. You have many actors, many plans, many projects, but the lack coordination. We have also the community participation. You can see some projects going in that side, but communities just say, looking, saying that coming from someone else. So, as we used to say in Senegal, just to try to translate it in English, if you do something for me without me, it means that it's against me. So you have the ambition in Senegal exists definitely, but the next challenge is scaling the implementation, taking into account what I had already mentioned, the needs of financing, the coordination, the capacity development, but also the coordination and also the community's participation.
So tell me, uh, it's easy to throw rocks and it's easy to say things are put in place, but by some metrics, you might say, you know, when 60% of the population can't afford a healthy diet, when food insecurity is doubling, people might use the words like failing. The government is failing its people. And you know, I think the plans and the best plans that we all have often collide with constraints. You know, things in Senegal's case and right across West Africa, the cost of food, access, resilience. You know, these things are all changing. But can you talk to us? You know, why do these gaps persist? Why is the food system right across West Africa still so vulnerable to weather shocks and seasonal stress? We know that climate change is real. We know that climate change is here and it's impacting, but this is not a new risk. Talk to us about the differences and the gaps and why these problems persist. And perhaps most importantly, if you were in charge, what would you fix? What would you prioritize? Would it be farming? Would it be training? Would it be seed banks? What would be the changes that you would make immediately?
From my experience, I think that today, if normally I should address this, I should work on at least five pillars. So the first one, we should work enough on the climate smart livelihoods. So which means helping the strategies or plan that will be helping farmers and the livestock keeper diversify the production. For example, drought resistant, having some drought resistant crops, improved soil management, and others. The second pillar will be the healthy ecosystems. So we should ensure, and we know that the nature itself is one of our strongest defense. So we should work on it. We should emphasize on that. The third one will be we should work to have strong institutions. So communities cannot adapt alone. Government needs to have better planning, climate information availability, extension service that is working, having funds, coordination, and the policy matter, the implementation matter. So everyone should do more. The fourth one should be the community participation or community engagement. So people are not just beneficiaries, there should be partners. So community must participate in the identifying of the problem, the implementation of the project, but also the monitoring. And the last but not the least is the communication. Communication is often just underestimated, but adaptation depends on the sharing of knowledge, so the build of trust, sharing of behaviors, create dialogue. So without communication, even good technical solution often fail.
I think they're really interesting, and I'd like to ask a follow up question around that, Ibrahim. But first, I'll just remind our listeners that if you prefer to watch your podcasts, the International Risk Podcast is always available on YouTube. So please do go to YouTube and search for the International Risk Podcast. And if you like our content, share it with a friend or colleague. And please do subscribe and like our content. This really is critical for our long term success and helping us find the best possible guests for you. So, Ibrahim, I like what you were talking about with the five pillars. And when I look at your work and when I read it and when I hear your public speeches, I think you bridge that gap between science and society, between science and communities really well. Can you describe to our listeners why does that gap actually exist in the first place, and what's the solution? What are you trying to bridge between science and society, or science and the communities that we're trying to serve?
So bridging science and the community or local community, this is perhaps where my own work focuses mostly strongly as I'm doing some research. So there is sometimes a tendency to think that scientific knowledge replaces local knowledge. I don't believe that. The best adaptation combines or should combine both. So scientific knowledge can provide, for example, climate projections, weather forecasting, modeling, risk analysis, while local knowledge from the communities contributes to environmental observation, decisional indicator, traditional coping mechanisms, but also resource management practices, and also the historical memory. So the future lies in knowledge co-production. I think that we could not continue having just two blocks. We should co-product. We should make those two knowledge together, and then we can enhance. We can also take advantage of those communities that are living. They are not just here sitting and looking. No, they had strategy. They are dealing with what they are facing, and they should be supported to enhance or to make it more effective what they are trying to do.
And I wonder, there's a lot of talk about the remnants of colonial history, and whether the fingerprints of colonial history are still present in West Africa. We've seen Russia largely come in through bribery and coercion and corruption and infiltrate many countries right across the African continent. But I'm wondering, particularly when you look in West Africa, when you look at the economy, when you look at institutions, are you still seeing these fingerprints left? I mean, there's the example of the French company Orano, formerly Arriva. They were extracting uranium there for decades. Now they left in 2025. There's lots of allegations that foreign companies, formerly French companies, now primarily Russian government companies, companies controlled by Russian oligarchs, still have a very heavy presence across the region. Um, is it better that they leave? Is it better that they stay? What's the best thing for people living in communities across West Africa? What needs to happen when we consider the not even the colonial past, but the colonial remnants that still remain, that influence land use and influence extraction, and ultimately often through corruption, influence government institutions?
Definitely, Dominic. I think that the economic, but also the political situation uh, are to be considered. They are a reality. So we feel now that we can see, how I can say, an opposition of countries, some countries rather than others. And sometimes it's a shift, sometimes it's just to confirm the former colonial relationship. I think that with young now, they feel that they need some changes, mostly in the political arena. I think what communities now need, they need to be more involved, and they need to be more listened. We are at an era or we can access to information, we can access to the world through internet, through all those social media. So which means that now people know more, they know enough, especially youth now. They are struggling or they are fighting to be more recognized, to have some what they call independence, because sometimes when they feel that we have some project or actions that seems coming from the exterior world, so sometimes they feel quite disappointed, and they don't accept it. So we can see more tension. I think that we have all those things going together. We have the knowledge, the level of the education, we have the pressure of climate change, but resources scarcity. So all those things make it in a situation that people or communities are now not close the eye on things. They are ready to say no, and that they are saying no. So things are moving in that way.
Yeah, we really have to. All of us, both business leaders, political leaders, and definitely external actors, need to be much, much better at listening. listening to our colleagues, listening to our employees, listening to communities, listening to our customers, listening to our various stakeholders. It's something I think we all need to get much better at. So, in saying that, Ibrahim, help us. What do you think the world gets wrong when they're looking at the food insecurity, when they're looking at climate change, when they're looking at foreign actors involved in West Africa? What are people in Europe and North America getting wrong? What are they misunderstanding? What's that one bit of information or perspective that you wish the world had when looking at West Africa?
From feedbacks or from the analysis I did and making this all those interaction with partners working or coming from Western world, coming in Africa on those West African countries communities, I think that one misconception is that vulnerable communities are passive victims. I say they are not. They innovate continuously. They experiment. They adapt every season. What they often lack is not ideas. They lack of investment support. So I think that's the maybe one of the biggest misconception I can mention.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I think I certainly have observed that too in my travels across Africa, Middle East, and the entire Indo-Pacific region. It's certainly not entrepreneurialism that's missing. It's not ideas that are missing. It's often just access to resources. Sometimes as basic as things like electricity, internet, and often, sadly, food, water, and healthcare services. But Ibrahim, one question that we ask all guests that come on the International West podcast is: when you look around the world, what are the risks that concern you the most?
I think the climate adaptation is not only about protecting nature. It's about protecting people. So what I mean that it's every investment in resilience today we are doing is it reduces the humanitarian crisis tomorrow. So community are already possess the knowledge, the innovation. So I think that the more pressing things we have is to be fair of what we are doing.
Thank you very much for explaining that. And thank you very much for coming on the International Risk podcast today, Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, Dominic.
Well, that was a great conversation with Ibrahim Hama. I really appreciated hearing his thoughts on climate change in West Africa, the impacts on food insecurity, and of course, on the people living across the region. Today's episode was produced and coordinated by Maureen Christ. I'm Dominic Bowen, your host. Thanks very much for listening. We'll speak again in the next couple of days.